and welcome to the One More Thing podcast. Today I'm joined with Pastor Brett Watson and Susan Hickman.
Hi.
It's great to have you both on here.
It's great to be here.
And you guys did an excellent job this week. And it was one of my favorite subjects is gratitude. Laura and I had the honor of doing a similar talk on gratitude back in November, Thanksgiving time. So it's a great subject, and it was a great reminder, 7 months later of these things that we can do to live a more grateful life. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to start with the prescription. It was write down one thing you are grateful for. And so I know when we were preparing for the talk, you were emphasizing, Susan, the idea of journaling, like a gratitude journal.
Yeah, it years and years ago, I started it, like Oprah said, to start a grateful journal. And she had a quote where she said, if you are grateful, you will always have enough and more. But if you're always looking for more, you'll never have enough. And I did just start a grateful journal, like she said, and write down 3 things. I did it with my kids when they were little. And you find yourself start looking for things to put in your journal that night. And I remember one day driving down the road, and I turned a corner, and there was this beautiful jacaranda tree. And I was just like, that is incredible. I'm going to put that in my grateful journal. With a side note, I'm so grateful it's not in my yard.
Just a little asterisk there. Yeah.
That I don't have to clean it up. But it's really pretty, God. So I do think just looking, it's about perspective. Yeah. It is. It's about looking at what you have and being so grateful.
I think that's such an important thing, and it's so understated. This idea of living a life of gratitude completely changes your reality and your perspective on life. And it's not only just the idea of being grateful to God. Obviously, like that's a really important piece of it, but it's also like to your family, and I try to express a lot of gratitude to Laura, my wife. Mm-hmm. I'm grateful when my kids listen and they do what they're supposed to do, and they give us a lot of love. And so I try to reinforce that idea of gratitude as well. But you had an interesting line from this weekend, and I kind of want to break this down, Brett. You said, being positive in light of reality. Let's take that out of the ethos and bring that down.
Out of the ether?
Out of the ether into, like, what does that mean?
It means that with the right perspective, you can feel gratitude no matter what your circumstances are. So instead of in despite of reality, we said in light of reality, because even when things are going even maybe horribly, right, you can still maintain an attitude of gratitude if your perspective is right. And so what's that perspective? It's the perspective of the mystics, really, which look at reality as something that exists because of the contrasts. Not only mystics, but I pointed this out that scientists are saying this. I mean, information theory is all about that. Randomness is necessary, and the chaos and the order both are necessary. And so one provides for the other. You
Put a post-it note on that, because I do want to come back to information theory, but go ahead. Sorry.
So even when I'm going through adversity, I can give thanks at the very least for the contrast that it gives me for what I would consider a blessing in my life.
Yeah. And I think this is the hard part about this specific subject, right? Because especially when I did the talk with Laura, she hears a lot of terrible stories and terrible situations that people are in, and she has to help guide them through that. And gratitude is one of the tools that she uses for that. But there's some unimaginable suffering that even happens here in Sarasota. And it's like, how do you broach that subject with an individual of saying, being thankful for the suffering that is so, so bad?
How do you, well, I'm sure Laura would tell you that you have to be careful.
Yeah.
A lot of times a person just isn't ready to hear that. And so you have to be sensitive to that. So I'm talking more from a helicopter view when I say that we can be thankful for suffering. When you're going through it, that's the last thing that you're feeling. So, and we were careful. We didn't want to minimize whatever suffering people were going through.
No, I think you guys did a really good job about that. Yeah.
Thanks. But at the same time, when you are standing outside of that position of suffering, very often you'll look back and you'll think things like, wow, I never grew so much as when I was going through this.
Yeah.
And at least in that sense, I'm really thankful that I went through that.
Mm-hmm. I think the one that came to mind was Lisa Moore. So for those of you who don't know, Lisa Moore, she's the founder of Blaze of Hope. Mm-hmm. She lost her son. How old was he? About 3 years old, 3 or 4.
I didn't even know if he was 3 yet.
So she lost her son to cancer at 3 years old. You couldn't tell her, be thankful for the suffering.
No.
But she started this foundation, Blaze of Hope, out of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's done a lot of really amazing things. So she turned her suffering into something positive. And I think that's what you guys were getting at. And I think you delivered that really well. Is like, we're not going to minimize your suffering, but look at the positive things that you can do after you've overcome that suffering, because you are stronger.
Same with Connie Kaufman and Empowerment Group.
Yeah.
You know, she lost her son, and out of that, she wanted to turn it into a positive thing, and has helped hundreds of people.
Yeah.
So I think it's important we do that.
And so the question that came to mind is, how do we reconcile a God that allows for suffering?
We talked about that.
Yeah.
Suffering is what leads so many, even Bart Ehrman, who's a famous New Testament prof, to question even the existence of God. How could a God make a reality that's filled with suffering?
I think a lot of atheists use that as their number one argument.
Yeah.
I can't believe in a God that would allow so much suffering in the world.
Yeah. This is an argument, in my view anyway, that philosophically has been soundly defeated for many, many years. It keeps coming up. But so how do we do that? Susan asked me, what do you say to people who say, how could a God exist that creates this reality with so much suffering? And I said, my initial response is usually the kind of God who is genius.
Right.
And this is because what I said earlier, that you can't have existence without both. There's no meaning to that existence, but you really can't even have existence without the contrasts.
So I think this kind of butts up against at least some factions of traditional Christianity, in the sense that you hear terms like God is in control. You hear, God needed to take this individual because he needed him up in heaven. Certain things like that.
Yeah.
So
Christian platitudes.
Exactly. So like, or even the horrible things like people will say, oh, there's some sin in your life. That's why God took your son. Mm-hmm. Stuff like that.
Oh,
Obviously, we butt up against that ideology and that view of God. But the question that always comes to my mind is, okay, let's say we don't believe in a God that causes suffering, but he allows suffering, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
if we believe that God exists, we have to say that.
Right. So is there, on the same side, on the flip side of that, we do give God a lot of credit for good things that happen in life. Do we butt up against that idea as well? Does a God that causes good things to happen in your life, is that almost even worse than a God that causes suffering or causes harm in your life?
I just think it's better to embrace the mystery that God is the ground of existence, of being itself. And that is a wildly complex reality.
Yeah.
And trying to assign all the good things to God that happen in my life is just as silly as trying to assign all the bad things. It's just, he's created this reality. This reality contains both suffering and pleasure. And there's, I think philosophically, there's good reason for that, as I mentioned.
Yeah. The whole idea of free will, like if you're forced to love a God or follow a God because he made you,
right?
It's not really, related to your kids. Like you're the parent guru. Like you can't force your kids to love you.
Right.
And then if you do, what kind of love is that? That's not real love.
Well, and I talk a lot about how we should parent, how God parents us in a way that, your kids will make mistakes and make bad choices. Instead of grounding them for it or whatever, come alongside them and help them make better choices so they understand later. And I think that's kind of what God does with us. Ugh,
Yes.
bad decision. So there was a bad outcome, but you know what? I'm there with you. I'll walk through this with you and I'll be with you. Instead of, he didn't cause that to happen, nor is he going to fix it, but he's there beside you while you do.
I think that's so perfectly said.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the foundations of my belief in God, that we want to attribute these bad things to him and we want to attribute these good things to him, but either way, he's with us. There's a line from the song that we sing, Another in the Fire.
I love that.
And it's I'll count the joy come every battle, because I know that's where you'll be.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really, just from the first time we sang it, I was like, oh, that's kind of a weird line. But when I really thought about it, you're thankful for the suffering and the battle, because that's when you lean on God a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot harder to lean on God when things are going good. You kind of forget that he's there, but when he's walking beside you during the suffering, and he's, it's the classic, the footprints in the sand, like he's carrying you. He's there, and you just have to lean into that and lean on him. And there's a lot of comfort to be had.
And the problem of pain, C.S. Lewis said that pain is God's megaphone to a deaf world. And so you're right, we do. We lean more on him when the pain comes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the concept of when you're through it, when you've gone through that fire, you've come out of it, and yes, you're scarred, you're burned, but you're thankful for the lessons instead of dwelling on the negatives, right? So this kind of perfectly sums up this entire series of like, I will take the responsibility of picking myself up and my life, putting my life back together and continuing on and learning from those lessons and learning that I can rely on God to be with me despite whatever I go through, in spite of anything that I might be going through. He's there with me. And I think that's a really important lesson. And I think that's a really good reconciliation for a God that would allow suffering.
Yeah.
And I said on Sunday, I loved how the whole prescription 2.0 came together in, positivity, gratitude, surrounding yourself with people that bring that into your life. I said on Sunday, it just kind of all came together, like this one links to this one, and using your words to build people up and being grateful for them, and just the different prescriptions overlapped each other so well on how to minimize chaos in your world.
I think this has been one of our better series. I've really enjoyed this one. Just a lot of, again, practical things that you can implement in your life to live a better life. And nothing's crazy, groundbreaking or anything. They're just all great reminders of like, these are the ways we recommend you live and principles that you implement in your life. So this was a great way to sum up and summarize this entire series and just the gratitude. And it's an important reminder. But do you guys have anything else that you guys kind of left out?
I did want to say that I think it's good if people consider what is the goal of creation. And if the goal of creation is for God to be in relationship with free beings, then the more you think about that, the more genius this reality looks, and the more grateful you can be for it.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
That's really good.
You got anything else, Susan?
No,
All right.
I'm good.
Well, great job this past weekend.
Thank
you.
And we've got a good one coming up this week. Pastor Larry's going to be doing Freedom Standalone in honor of 4th of July, so it should be good. So thank y'all.
Looking forward
Thank
to it. Thanks.